Hello, I'm Brittany Devereaux,
I'm John Devereaux.
and you are tuning in to the What a Wonderful Life podcast. So today we'll be talking about our stay in the PICU, which was after our NICU stay that we talked about in episode 1.
So I'll have this picture up, and it says it's something that you posted right, I guess, when we got home. You said that this picture sums up the 24 hours since getting home from the NICU. So I know for me, it was like really hectic because we came home with his oxygen, we came home with his pulse ox and his feeding tube. So I know it was really hectic for me. How was it, I guess, for you?
And nerve wracking. He had all these devices in the hospital for some time. So you had gotten used to them, but not used to them around or being on your own.
Yeah.
So that was a little nerve wracking. And I remember the pulse ox kept having errors, so it was constantly beeping. So then you hear the beeping and you're freaking out, like what could be wrong, and it's nothing that's coming off of his foot, his toe, or whatever. So that was just we had to,
Yeah, I
get
think
used to it.
that was a huge adjustment, not being able to, go out of the room and tap the nurse on the shoulder, say, hey, how do we fix this error or
Definitely.
what's going on? So I remember it being a huge adjustment, especially with his feeds. Since he was getting everything through his G tube, his feeding tube, it was on a strict schedule, so like every 3.5 hours. So like even overnight, we were having to wake up at like, midnight to start his feed, wake up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, start his feed, and then wake up at 7:30. So I remember it was just
Very tedious.
yeah, very tedious and a lot of teamwork. So we had to kind of be on the same page on like, okay, I'm gonna stay up overnight this time, and you got this feed and things like that. So just kind of divvying up the task.
Teamwork makes dream work. And so let's see, we kept him home for a little bit, which is to be expected. We didn't want to really bring him out because we did not want to go back to the hospital at all. So we made that clear to people. We did have some visitors come to the house, and they already knew. Purell was sitting right there, our buddy, and everybody sanitized and didn't come over if they had any illnesses or anything.
Right.
So they were very respectful. So to be expected. We didn't want to go back, and nobody else wanted us to go back.
Right. Yeah, we were definitely those parents who had that Purell in every single room of the house, and like you said, most of our friends, they knew our situation, so yeah, they didn't take offense at all
It was easy to adapt to, just a way of life.
Yeah, when we kept him home for like the first couple of weeks, and then we eventually started taking him out. I remember taking him to my job, introducing him to my coworkers,
Oh, yeah.
and we had a couple of other things, doctor's appointments and things like
Yeah,
that.
definitely. And even still keeping people away while you're in public, I think that might be worse than obviously than people you know.
Yeah, because you're walking around with a car seat, everybody's like, "Oh, there's the
What's
baby in
in
there."
it? Yeah, I
Yeah,
had that a
hey,
couple
back
times. I'm
up.
like, oh, I really don't have to give you the whole rap sheet right now. Just give us some space, please.
I remember eventually we got to the point where we took him to church for the first time, and his first time going to church was actually his baby dedication slash
Baby shower.
baby shower, right?
For our Macomb family, because we already had our Rockford one,
Yeah.
which a lot of them came down to.
Yeah, so I mean, it was just a huge event. So it was fun to be able to have him there, and like all of our Macomb family and friends be
Yeah.
able to come
Kill two
and
birds with one
see him.
stone. Yeah, they could come for the baby dedication because we had family coming from Rockford too that came down. So they were able to be at the dedication and then attend the shower afterwards at the church. So that was pretty nice.
And it worked out since it was right over, I believe that's Memorial Day weekend. So people had that Monday off, which actually kind of transitions us to um,
Dun, dun, dun,
that
dun.
Monday.
My parents were down for that event. Kind of started by feeding JJ. He had a tubing from his G tube that would go to his tummy by gravity. Kind of takes its time on its own, and I was noticing that the food wasn't really going down like it normally does. It was just still kind of stagnant. So I kind of walked out, came back, checked a couple times, was still the same. For whatever reason, I decided to lift up his shirt just to look at his G tube area, and I noticed that his belly was very distended,
Yeah.
and it was very shiny. So obviously, if anybody's had any swollen areas on their body, the skin tends to swell, it tightens, and then it becomes shiny because it's being stretched. So that's what his belly looked like, and that was not normal. So of course, red flag.
Yeah, we were both kind of freaking out, but at that point, I remember,
Trying to remain calm, yeah.
calling the nurse, because we had that 24-hour hotline that we can call, if anything went wrong. And they were kind of telling us, oh, we'll just kind of monitor it for a couple of hours.
Yeah, but nothing was changing, and I was getting more worried because the food still wasn't going down, like it was being blocked or something. It was really weird. So we decided to call the hospital, the emergency room, and we took him in. We were in Macomb at MDH, and the hospital, they did a lot of tests, ran tests on him, scans. He got prodded and poked a whole lot, and it was really, the conclusion, it really was, nothing was coming of it.
And throughout this whole time, JJ was really lethargic. He was kind of fussy, but he wasn't whining or anything. So
no, he wasn't really showing any signs. He was just kind of like no energy.
Yeah, so that was like another red flag too.
Yeah.
Like even though he's getting poked and prodded, as you said, having them drawing blood.
Kinda, yeah.
He was just kind of taking it.
Yeah, which was definitely not JJ because he fights about everything.
Right.
So they finally decided, Peoria, I think is your best option because clearly they were not fit to take care of him or, any further. So we had to wait for Peoria to get there. They ambulanced him. I rode in the ambulance in the front.
And and I had to tell you guys because I think only one person can ride in the ambulance, and because your parents were still down there, so I'm following the ambulance and your parents are following me in their car, and we was kind of hitting it, going pretty fast. And I remember a cop pulled us over, or pulled your parents over, and luckily the cop was pretty cool about it, knew that we were going to the hospital. But yeah, so we had to make that drive from Macomb back up to Peoria again.
Yeah, and the ambulance went a separate way too, a different route that I've never been to Peoria. So we went one way, kind of left, I think, first, and then they followed. But yeah, it was, you got idle time sitting there, okay, like back to Peoria, I'm comforted because they know him, but, kind of course, worrying as well.
And then when we got to Peoria, they were still running some more tests and still trying to figure out what exactly was wrong with JJ. And the one thing that they didn't want to do was surgery. And come to find out, a couple days later, that's exactly what he needed at that time.
Yeah, exactly what he needed.
So we got admitted on the 29th of May. And then they decided to go in and do the exploratory surgery on June 1st. Just because all the tests that they were running were inconclusive and they still couldn't figure out what was causing, him to act the way that he was acting.
And I remember the doctor was saying either JJ has a really high pain tolerance or he is very, very sick.
Yeah.
To where like you're too sick, you can't really do anything. And he wasn't showing any symptoms. So that was worrisome for them because they could tell it was something and he wasn't reacting how they feel like he should have been reacting. So,
yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. I remember him saying that.
So on June 1st, they decided to go in and just do exploratory surgery just to kind of see what was going on. And then I remember, no parent ever wants their kid to go through surgery, but I just remember that being like a really tough time just sitting in that waiting room waiting for, your number to pop up on the screen to say that, he's out of surgery.
And usually when you're going to get surgery, you know what they're doing. So he's going in for surgery and we don't know what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. So, I mean, they have to go in and take a look. So I think that's even worse than like going in for something scheduled. We don't know what they're going to find.
And with that, we were unprepared for what they actually did find. So come to find out that JJ had a bowel obstruction. So half of his small intestines had died off. And that's what was causing him to be very sick and act the way that he was acting. So they went in and removed half of his small intestines. So after the first surgery, they called us back into the little room. No windows or anything in there.
It was like a crazy house.
Yeah.
White walls.
And I remember the surgeon, he pulled up a whiteboard and he drew out the intestines. And he talked about how there was a blockage and half of it had died off, so they had to remove it. And they said that they were still worried that some more of it might be dying off. So they wanted to schedule surgery 2 days later to go back in and see if
more would be dead. Because their worst fear is taking whatever out, closing him up, and then it not being over with because it had to be done again because he'd be sick again. And it was really serious. It could have led to death. I don't know how long JJ could have went if he wouldn't have noticed anything, but it really could have been really bad. And
He
I
was
don't,
in critical condition.
yeah, and I don't want to think about, if we wouldn't have noticed something, how long he would have blew it off, or
Yeah.
I don't even want to think about.
So since they didn't want to close him up because they wanted to go back in 2 days later, they just left the wound open. So I forgot what type of.
It was like gauze. Is kind of how they, and they had tape or whatever over it, so it wasn't,
Yeah, we could see
you
it.
just saw the white stuff sticking on, like, on his tummy. But at this time, from all the fluid and different things and surgery and whatever, JJ was very swollen. So he was
Yeah.
almost like, obviously, I'm sure it's not true, but almost like twice the size, because he's still at this point maybe 3 to 4 pounds, I think.
Yeah, he was
So he's still a
little.
small guy. He was very swollen, and they had to sit him like on this little incubator table where he was pretty much propped up, and they had to sedate him. So he was like paralyzed so that he would not intervene with anything else that was going on.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he had to lay like this for, it was the first day of surgery, and then a rest day, then surgery, and then a rest day, and then surgery again.
So he had a total of 3 surgeries. So when they went back in that second time, they saw that, went back in and removed some more of his small intestines. And then they were wanting to once again wait a couple of days before going back in, just to check in before connecting him.
Mm-hmm.
Because as they're cutting out pieces of his small intestines, it's not there's gaps.
Right,
So
so they can't connect it. And they
yeah.
don't want to do it just yet either, so they have to wait for the bowel to wake up at different things. So after we had that last one, they said, I think we're good. We got off. I think the last time it might have been a small amount they might have took out, but it wasn't anything significant.
Mhm.
So, and at this point too, obviously they want to take out all the dead bowel, but they want to try to save as much as possible as well, because this is a vital part of your organs that you need. So the less you have, the harder it is. And the area that he got taken out was the part that absorbs the nutrients and helps you grow. JJ's already a micro preemie, which means he's already on the smaller side by default. So now he has this to where it's gonna be hard for him to gain nutrients, which that helps you to grow.
So with him having so much of his small intestines removed, he has a condition what's called short gut syndrome or short bowel syndrome.
Yeah, SBS.
So this was my first time just hearing about it,
Yeah.
after having these surgeries, and all of a sudden we're thrust into this new diagnosis. So I remember, after, I can't remember if it was the second or the third surgery, just going up to the room afterwards and just really completely out of it, because you're in a mental space where it's really hard to kind of comprehend what exactly is going on and what this means for your child going forward. So I remember just running some Google searches to try to find, anything of some kids who had the condition and what their quality of life was, 3 or 4 years later. So I remember the doctor coming in, his surgeon, saying, well, with this condition, it's going to be hard for him to eat. And they had to give him what's called TPN, which is nutrition that goes in intravenously.
So he had what's called a Broviac that was in the top of his shoulder, and I believe it said it went straight to like the heart, the vein straight to the heart. So a TPN is built up of different nutrients and different things that the body needs when you can't get that through feeding. So I mean, that's a plus that they have that as a substitute, but the longer you're on TPN, the more damage it can do to your organs, specifically the liver. So a lot of kids the people that we follow on like one of the groups, some people have to be on it for life.
Yeah, because at this point, JJ can't tolerate any feeds through his feeding tube because his intestines aren't connected just yet.
Yeah.
So, and the title of this episode is The Waiting Game, because after we had that third surgery, we had a month before they were ready to go back in and reconnect him. So just to give his body some time to heal up.
So at this time, we have what's called an ostomy procedure was done, to where a colostomy bag was placed on. So they kind of bring the bowel to the skin, and the ostomy bag is placed around it and sealed on the skin.
Because at this point, JJ's intestines aren't connected. So they took a piece of the intestines and brought it to the skin and created a stoma is what it's called. And then they have the colostomy bag around it, so that he can eliminate waste from his body, so it's not seeping inside of him, which could make him sicker than what he already was.
And that colostomy bag is like a whole trick to itself is how it had to be sealed, and you can bet there was some leakage
Yeah.
and different things. I mean, it didn't really.
I remember it coming off one time, and then all of the contents.
Yeah, we would have. I remember you had it on one of your shirts. Yeah. So, and then I got to the point where, because I'm watching some of the nurses put it on, and I'm like, they're not doing it right because I didn't watch it enough. So I got to the point where I started kind of fixing it and thinking of ways to make it stay on, because whenever it gets wet, saturated, it would not stick anymore. So I said that's a little notch I should have had on my little certificate.
Yeah.
I learned how to do colostomy bags while I was there, but that was an adventure.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, we just pretty much moved into the PICU there in Peoria. Now this time it was a little bit different because even though we were having extremely unfortunate circumstances, I should say, timing was actually pretty good because it was summertime. So I was off work for the summer, so we were able to be together this time. So that made a whole world of difference.
Yeah,
I
definitely. It was, obviously something that we haven't experienced the first time. So we needed each other there for this. I don't know how one of us could have just been there by ourselves with this, because this was a lot more critical situation than the first time. So.
Yeah, in the NICU, I mean, he was born small, so the goal is to just grow. That's all you're doing. You just want him to grow. But this time, it was a little bit more life-threatening, so you were a little bit more on your P's and Q's in a sense, and it was just more of I think it would have been more traumatizing if it was just one person there.
Yeah, it was a lot more to process.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, a lot more to process, to where you needed somebody to lean on, or just somebody just to be there, period. Even if we wasn't necessarily having a conversation with each other at the moment or whatever, but just somebody just to be there in the moment.
So coming off of that third surgery, JJ came out of it with just his nasal cannula, but because of the meds that he was on, and the
amount of pain he was in.
Yeah, due to the amount of pain that he was in, he was having a hard time, controlling his breathing.
Yeah, his oxygen levels were fluctuating a little too much. So when they see that, that's a sure cause to get our good friend the ventilator.
Yeah, so JJ got put on the ventilator again, and I know from your experience in the NICU when he was on the ventilator, because I don't think we talked about that before, but they tried him on the ventilator a couple times. Well, off the
ventilator, yeah. So, I mean, he has to pass it. He has to be at certain levels. So it was a couple times that he had to do it. So that's taking the ventilator out, him trying it, putting it back in. And it was, ugh.
Yeah, so that's just traumatic. Yeah. Well, a traumatic experience. So I remember at this point when he got put on the ventilator again, and I think was it just overwhelming?
The ventilator is just, some of those things that just happen. You just tend to shut down. And every time it was on, every time he did it or got it, it was like we were taking steps backwards.
Yeah.
So, because he has to come off of that, wean off of that, and then, and the ventilator can cause other things too, like pneumonia and different things over time. So, I mean, it's not great to have it, but I mean, if you need it to save your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, every time the ventilator came to the picture, it was just like a dark cloud. It just kind of hovered over, to where I just, just didn't want to, I just like detached, I guess, from the situation and just in a mode.
Once again, since we were both there, we were kind of able to recognize when the other person was getting a little too
more so me than him,
a little too overwhelmed. So I remember at that point, I was just like, "Hey, Britt, just get away for a couple of days."
And that was hard too, because I didn't want to do that either. It was like, no, you couldn't win, but
But sometimes that's what you need to just kind of refresh yourself in a sense, and I felt better being able to be there this time for you, since you held it down in the NICU. So it felt good for me to be able to, stay there and hold down the fort while you get away for a couple of days. So I remember, I think you were going for maybe like 2 or 3 days. So me and JJ just hanging out in the PICU. But at this point, he eventually got off of the ventilator. I believe it was like 2 or 3 days later. So you weren't there the time when they took him off.
I would always miss it. Like, that's the glory moment that I need to be present for. And he would always do it when I was there. So maybe I was stressing him out too. I don't know. Maybe I was.
So our PICU experience was really different than our NICU experience because we can hold him, we
Yeah.
can interact with
Not
him
as
as
many
much as we want to.
restrictions when he wasn't as critical, which we had a lot of time that that waiting period. So during this waiting period, we pretty much Peoria was our second home. We got acclimated to the area, and we
Had a church we were going to up
yeah, church
there.
home, going to
we
the
had,
gym,
yeah,
go to the mall. But we even shared some holidays there. So our first holiday was Father's Day before?
Father's Day would have been the first one.
Yeah, so I got to spend my Mother's Day at home because we left the NICU in time for me to spend my first Mother's Day at home. But Dad had to spend Father's Day in the PICU. And we had a photo of that, and John was watching the game. JJ was supposed to be watching the game, but he had some heavy meds. So JJ was taking a nap while Dad was watching the game. But that was a holiday, and then 4th of July, we had a photo with that on Facebook too. So we just kind of went down the hall to the window, fireworks in the back, and we were able to take JJ. I think he was asleep in that photo too.
Probably was. I'll have the picture up too.
Yeah, I think he was asleep in that photo too. So and then we were able to wheel his little pole down with his meds and things on it. So we were able to do a whole lot more than we really could in the NICU. So to kind of get him out of the room because we had been home already at that point. So yeah, so 4th of July, and then our anniversary.
Yeah, that would have been later, and at the end of July.
Yeah, we went out to eat. We got our first Uber ever in Peoria, and we went to Granite City and went out to eat. So that was nice just to kind of get out for a little bit.
Yeah, so we were able to do just a lot more, and I think, as Brittany said, the most important thing is we were able to do more as a family unit.
Yeah, we needed that.
And pretty much, like I said, every day we were pretty much right there in the PICU. And, I think the nurses and the doctors, they pay close attention to that. And I mentioned it in the last video that I think that when the nurses and doctors see that the parents are as involved, and luckily we only had JJ, so I know a lot of other parents aren't able to be there just because they may have other kids or, work or things like that.
We were asked that a lot. So how many kids? Do you have any other kids at home? Like, no. And they always see the look on our face because there were a lot of people that did have kids at home that they couldn't be there 24/7 because they had to take care of their other kids at home as well. So yeah, I couldn't have imagined having more kids and dealing with that. That was too much.
And like I was saying, I think the nurses and the doctors, when they saw like how committed we
definitely. It made a difference.
It really did.
Yeah.
And I think that they tried a little bit harder. Not to say that they don't try at all.
Right, like but
they started advocating a little bit more for JJ.
Yeah, exactly, because they knew that we were there. We knew what was going on. We knew about everything. So we weren't kept out of the loop or anything. So we knew what JJ could do and what he couldn't do by that point. Mm-hmm. And they, like you said, they advocated more. And I think they care. Yes, that's their profession. They love what they do. But they care even more when they see the parents really care and are really sacrificing. Their normal, to be there, and because we didn't have to be there every day. Nobody was doing anything, but we didn't want it any other way. So.
Right, I agree. So eventually we got to July 5th when he went down for surgery again.
Yeah.
And
it's for the reconnection surgery.
For the reconnection surgery. So a month has passed, and they felt like that was enough time for his intestines to heal up so that they can go back in and reconnect him, and then just wait for his
waiting game again.
Right, wait for his intestines to kind of wake up after that surgery. So what were your thoughts, I guess, the day of that surgery?
Like any other one, you're just praying that everything goes smoothly and that they go in there just to do that and that's it. And then we can kind of, because every time you have a surgery, it's like you're taking steps back again. He's healing up, he's doing better, back to surgery. So that's a recovery period that has to be done after that surgery, because opening his stomach, now it's kind of healed up a little bit. That's a really invasive surgery. So
I just remember that morning he was very happy. So I remember he had the little thing on the top of his crib that was go around, and he was just looking at it and smiling and things like that. Mm-hmm. So he was very peaceful going into that surgery. So that kind of helped me to be a little bit more at ease. Yeah. But as a parent, you never can get comfortable in that situation, because even though you're praying for the best, you're also kind of mentally preparing yourself for the worst. And I mean, I hate to, be a pessimist or pessimistic about it, but after those 3 surgeries that we had back in June, that's always going to be at the forefront of your mind, or at least for
Right.
me, it was at the forefront of my
Of
mind.
course. You try
So
not to, but I mean, are human. You can't help it.
yeah, so throughout that time, I was just trying to do everything I could to kind of distract myself.
Yeah.
But I remember getting called back into the room again, and then they said, okay, we reconnected him, blah blah blah. So
Now this road to recovery.
now, yep. So now
And he
all we gotta
got
do is just get
the,
him
so
better.
he already had the Broviac,
Hmm.
the first surgery, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So now he's back on TPN though.
And got rid of his colostomy bag.
So at this point, we're just waiting again because.
Oh, and he's back on our friend came back.
Oh yeah, I mean after surgery again, yeah, he got put back on the ventilator. Once
Dun,
again, the
dun, dun,
pain
dun.
meds that he was on.
Came
So,
out off of it, and then had to get back on it again. So every single time they came in with that, I'm like, I need to wait a little bit longer. Maybe he'll do a little bit better tonight. He's just stressed out right now. But they didn't want to chance it. I think I remember us, like, one of the times we were in the room, like, sleeping or something, and they came in and, like, tapped us and was like, we're gonna have to put him back on the ventilator. And talking about, like, an attitude. It took everything I had in me not to get a lady the ugliest, nastiest look. But I mean, like, what are you doing? What are you gonna do? So that happened again, and then I think John sent me off again at some point, and I went to Rockford for the weekend or for a day or whatever it was.
I believe it was 3.
3 days?
Yeah, well, there was a wedding that was going on too, but yeah, you were going for a while
Okay.
because I remember my sister coming down
Oh.
and we were spending some time together, so she stayed with me and JJ in the room.
And you know what he did while I was gone?
Yeah, well, he had a special visitor too. He had Sean Livingston came
Yeah,
from the Warriors, and he was coming in taking pictures with a lot of the kids in the PICU.
JJ was asleep again. He missed it. He misses
Yeah,
all the
he
fun
misses
stuff.
everything.
He
But
misses all the fun stuff.
I remember, that kind of made an impact on me just because, like, here's this professional athlete who just got out of the NBA Finals, and he's taking time to give back to the hospital since he was from Peoria. So I remember they were going around and giving little basketballs to all the kids there, and helping
Memorable
out,
moment,
giving
making
back.
memories for other people. Pretty cool.
So then eventually he got off of the ventilator a couple days later.
I remember you FaceTime me or something, and you was like, "Mommy, do I look different?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "He's off the ventilator." I'm like, praise ye.
And see, I remember during this time while he was on the ventilator and they were trying to wean him off, there was a doctor there, and he was really advocating. He's like, okay, I think he can do this. And I remember some of the other,
The one I call him King JJ.
yes, the intensivist. That was his
he
name.
was. We liked him a lot.
Yeah, so he was like, he can do this. And sometimes you just need somebody who believes in your kid.
Yes.
Because
a lot of times.
who knows how much longer he could have been, on that ventilator. But the doctor was like, yeah, let's try him off of this. And once he got off, he stayed off, so he was able to control his breathing and things like that.
And a lot of times he would have like even the little nose cannula thing. He'd be asleep, and I'm be like, "What is that noise?" And it's like off his nose, like blowing air on his lip. I'm like, "We need to take this thing off."
Yeah,
he is
he's
not
just
even
being
using
lazy.
it. Yeah, he's not even using it. Like, come on, JJ, get it together.
So, so then when Brittany came back, now, like I said, we're just playing that waiting game. Now, during this time that we're there, they're waiting for his intestines to heal back up and wake up, actually, so that they can start his feeds again through his feeding tube. So eventually we got to the point where they started weaning him down on the oxygen. So I remember we'd go from like a quarter to an eighth, and then
Yeah, it
a
was
16th,
ridiculous.
and then a 32, a 32nd. So they started to decrease the amount of oxygen that he was getting through his nasal cannula, but then also seeing if he was tolerating his feeds.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think we mentioned this, but one of the, I guess, symptoms, not symptoms, but one of the things that happens with a lot of kids who have short bowel syndrome is they have very frequent stools.
Yeah, and that was something that we were told that JJ would have either forever or for a long time. So this is excessive. He said like 6-7 times a day, and like straight liquid. And so also what happens too, think about when you have liquid, like a baby's has liquid form and it's, sitting on your bottom, it wears the skin down. So then you have like diaper rash,
Yeah.
so which is very painful.
Yeah, I remember the surgeon was like, yeah, he's gonna have a lot of diaper rash. He never got diaper rash.
Yeah, and we was applying that Desitin and everything else. Somebody had told us a little concoction. We was mixing a few things, some other stuff, and some over the counter stuff that we had got, and we were on it because we were like, no, we can't have. That's another problem that we don't need.
Yeah.
But yeah, JJ bounced back really good.
So throughout the month, it was another month essentially. So they're weaning him down off of the oxygen, and he's starting to tolerate his foods. I mean, his feeds a little bit more.
Now that he's tolerating, the feeds and everything, these are good signs that, we can eventually wean off the TPN, which is the ultimate goal because you don't want them on that for too long. So he was showing, he was progressing in the right direction and was doing it at a decent amount of time. He was doing really well.
Yeah, so at this point, we were getting towards the end of our stay. And they tell you in the hospital that like you never tell a parent that you're getting ready to get discharged until the day
Not
of.
this parent.
But I remember one of the doctors, they were like, okay, you guys are going to be able to go home on Sunday. Sunday, August 7th was the day, I believe. And they were like, okay, you're going to be able to go home that day. And then I remember them coming in and the doctor telling us that
We're not going to be able to go home today.
yeah, she
and I'm not proud of myself, but I don't know what it was. And it only ended up being one more day. But that one more day felt like 100 years. Like, I'm like, we have been here long enough. You said that we can go home. So, I don't know, I just acted really childish. I remember I got a straight attitude when we were sitting in these chairs, and I, like, pulled the blanket over my face or something. I just, like, started crying, and I was like, look at me like, really? And I was like, pissed off. I remember I just got up, and I, like, walked in the bathroom, and closed the door, and I just went in, and I was crying. I was just so mad.
So I remember still talking to the doctor while you were having your episode in there.
My moment, Lord.
And then taking you, like, let's get out. And so I remember we went to the movies that night, and just to kind of get your mind off of it. But that extra day, even though we had to stay an extra day, it was actually very beneficial because on that last day, they were able to, JJ was able to tolerate all of his feeds through his G-tube. And he had came off of the oxygen by this point as well. Mm-hmm. So we ended up getting discharged from the hospital on August 8th. And he went home off of oxygen and off of TPN. I remember that our surgeon was telling us, you guys would probably be on TPN for years. And for JJ to be able to come off of it, a month later, that was just a testament to, the fighter that he is.
It was worth it all in all for the extra day. So, and we went home with the Broviac. We had to kind of learn that because you had to clean it in different ways. So I remember I had to.
Yeah, I didn't touch that thing.
So that was one of my tasks. So I remember, and you had to do it the right way because you didn't want like air and stuff because again, it's in a vein that's connected to the heart. Yeah. So if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. So, we had a nurse that would come to the house and she would show us how to properly do it. So, when I had to start doing it on my own in the beginning, I mean, it was when you're triple, quadruple checking what you have and if you're doing it correctly. But I mean, eventually then I got to where I was, you had to sterilize the area with the alcohol, the gloves on, making sure the stuff is out and ready to go. So, and then him moving around or whatever. Right. But we got through it and, we had to keep it sealed because he couldn't get it wet or like submerged in water and just different things or whatever. But
so all in all, we were in the PICU for 69 days total. And as we talked about, like, this experience was a little bit more challenging because of the severity of the condition JJ was in. But it was also, I guess, helpful for us since we were actually together and we can lean on each other for support. Based off of our experience, is there anything that just kind of stands out to you as you kind of look back on the PICU stay?
Just kind of overviewing myself. A lot of emotions, a lot of moods. I was mad a lot because I just didn't understand why we had just went to this traumatic thing. The NICU for 3.5 months and just the other little things that went into that. that you can't get back, and moments and different things, and to turn around and barely a month and have to come back in for something like even worse, and for a couple months stay again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I couldn't fathom it. I couldn't process it or understand it. I knew the Lord was with us regardless, and I remember us, saying, as long as you have the faith of a mustard seed, the faith the size of a mustard seed, and I kept that in my mind all the time, because like that's where I was. I was like, I feel like I wasn't going to renounce the Lord or denounce the Lord, but I was like hanging on, just kind of like just there.
I think it was
Like,
after
Lord,
that.
help, just help me.
After that second surgery, I think that second surgery when they were like some more had died off, and I think that hit all of us a lot harder than we were prepared for.
Just a lot. And like I said, coming off of an already traumatic situation, and we're still processing that. Yeah, it's been a month,
Right.
but I mean, you have a kid now that's home that you're trying to make sure stays alive with all of his different needs that are
Yeah.
going on. And then for this to happen, and it's kind of like we kept him from being sick and all these things, which didn't matter because this was something that we had no control over.
And like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
So, I mean, at that point, JJ had spent 80 or 85% of his entire life in the hospital.
All he knew.
Right. So, unfortunately, but
Like, he probably was like, "Isn't this normal?"
right. So that was his home. But yeah, as I look back on that experience, like I said, even though it was really traumatic, I was just happy that we were able to be together. And I remember that there were some times where, I wasn't feeling it too.
Yeah.
And just kind of getting over the whole situation of your day to day, wake up in the hospital, go to sleep in the hospital, wake up, go to sleep. And it became really mundane.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just tough to mentally press through that time. But
Yeah, and there's still things I think like now that will like trigger like certain hand sanitizers. If I go certain places and get hand sanitizers, it smells like the NICU there. Like when we had to scrub up and all that, those different things. It's really weird. Certain smells and different things or sounds, certain beeping or whatever, kind of takes you back for a moment, and you're like, wow, because a lot of this stuff I kind of not forget happened, but the details and stuff you don't think about on a daily. Maybe that's for the best, but when you bring them up as us talking about them, helps you kind of process them a little bit more. And I mean, anything that we've been through, that if it can help somebody else,
yeah,
I mean, that's the ultimate goal. There are testimonies for a reason that we came out, and and whoever you can too.
yeah, I think that's pretty much like the goal of us doing this. One is therapeutic for us to just actually go through and look back on our experience, because I don't think we haven't done this, and
when you really talk about it, I just saw in episode 1, it's still, even though it's been some time, it's still very fresh.
Yeah. So, and as Brittany has said, we do this to kind of help anybody who might be going through that experience, or if you have questions, always feel free to reach out to us. We are an open book about this experience, and also I'm a huge advocate for, if you are in that situation, you need someone to talk to. The hospital does always have those resources available.
Mm-hmm.
With the social worker, she would come by the rooms every single day.
Listen, man, I don't want to talk. Go next day. What's today? You came on Monday. Today is Tuesday. I didn't want to talk yesterday. I don't want to talk today either.
But it's
I mean,
there.
You just kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, thanks. So how you? Fine. And then we had I think a nun that was coming around a lot. He said a priest came around a couple times too, and they would check in every now and then people get to know you. Even after that NICU stay. I remember when JJ got admitted the second time. I remember some of our nurses saying, they have a log. They can see when people get signed in and get admitted into the hospital. And one of our very close nurses was like, I just happened to take a peek, and I saw JJ's name on there, and I was like, oh no. She's like, I had to come find you guys, and trying to see what was going on or whatever. So people still to this day keep tabs on JJ, send me private messages. They just want to see a photo of them if they're not on Facebook or like that, or He has a following. He's a little
Yeah,
superstar.
we had a really great great nurses while we were there in
Yeah.
the PICU. I mean, they were amazing. But I remember Dylan. I don't know if you remember Dylan, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
he stood out. So he was really
'Cause we
one
didn't
of
have too many male nurses. We had a couple that were Facebook friends, I believe, with the other one that we had too in the NICU.
but he went above and beyond for JJ, and those I take my hat off to anybody who's
He was
a
young
RN
too.
or any type of nurse that are dealing with sick kids especially. So
You got
they have hearts of gold.
you have to have a special gift for that because
I
I
agree.
don't think I could do it. The things that you see
Yeah,
and you have, I mean, these people have emotions, they have feelings, but to be able to still do their job and kind of set those to the side, but still care for the patient at the same time, that's a special gift.
I agree.
I don't think I could. Too maybe emotional. I don't know.
I agree. I agree on that too. But
Well, then you were
so
perfect for it then.
so I mean, I think that pretty much wraps up this episode, and I'm looking forward to the next episode where hopefully we can bring JJ in here and we can
Yeah.
talk about some of the things that are going on with him now.
See how long that
Because
lasts.
with that short gut syndrome, that's still something that we're dealing with to this day, and that's a huge part of our day-to-day activities.
Just because we went home doesn't mean that everything stopped. We have a whole host of other things
Yeah.
that we have to deal with and things that we'll talk about as far as him being in the hospital for so long. You're worried about saving this baby's life. He's missing out on a lot of other things as well that you don't know until it gets later on down the road. So all these things, everything has like a cause and effect type of situation, and things that we would have never thought of, we were dealing with after. If you thought the worst was over, and we still had a lot on our plates as being new parents and stuff. So talk about those things as well.
It's good to have our story out just so you know what our background is. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode when we dive into some more current issues.
Yes.
Thank you for watching.
Stay tuned.